All right. Well, welcome to round 3 of the plagiarism controversy. And we are just doing this so that science can advance. There's a theory that makes accurate predictions and it should be brought into the mainstream or at least discussed, but it hasn't happened. In 30 years, it hasn't happened. So it's about time to shine some light on it so that science can advance and that the biblical theory people can learn about it, and it can explain 25 major features on Earth and in the solar system, make accurate predictions, and be validated by NASA discoveries. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to solidify the creation position, and this is a theory that'll do it. It's called the hydroplate theory, and again, we're going on. This is round 3 of the of the round 3 of the controversy. And let me share my screen with you so you can see where to get these documents if you want to read them for yourself. You go into hydroplate.org. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of it. Yeah, we're going to get there eventually. Go into hydroplate.org. I want you to see how to get there. Hydroplate.org. Go into hydroplate resources, down to hydroplate controversy, and then click this button. Very unnoticeable, but very important. Click it where it says hydroplate documents, right in the top left corner there, right above Kevin Lee. So you can click that. And in round 1, we did the letter to Steve Austin, and then we did and round 2, we did this one here. And now we're going to go on to round 3, Austin to Brown, in September 24th of 1993. So this is round 3. This is September 24th, 1993. So think about this. This happened 30 years ago. 32 years ago it happened. This is 2025 when we're making this recording. 32 years ago, they've been sweeping this under the rug. And so this is Austin to Brown. This is let's see, let's go down to the bottom. It's from Steve Austin. It's going to Dr. Walt Brown. It says, "Dear Walt," and again, this is November 24th, 1993. "Dear Walt, Henry Morris and I have discussed the matter you keep bringing up, and we are in agreement that specific offenses that you say I made against you should be arbitrated. Enclosed is my signed revision of the agreement for binding arbitration that you requested. I hope this agreement is satisfactory with you. 3 copies are included, 1 to be retained by you, 1 to be returned to me, and 1 to be returned to the arbitrator. Attorneys I know recommended the following arbitrator: Stephen E. Hurst out of Encinita, California, attorney at law. Evidently, he has an excellent reputation. I have never met Mr. Hurst, and he does not know me. I talked on the phone with Mr. Hurst briefly last week. He said that he has extensive experience in Christian arbitration. His fee is $200 per hour, and he expressed interest in helping us. Mr. Hurst will be out of his office until December 6th. You can call him when he returns. What is your response to this offer of Christian arbitration? Sincerely, Stephen Austin, Chairman, Geology Department." Okay, this is the agreement. Okay, and okay. Agreement for binding arbitration. Stephen A. Austin, Institute for Creation Research, Santee, California, and Walter T. Brown Jr., Center for Scientific Creation, Phoenix, Arizona, agreed to enter into binding arbitration in order to settle a dispute between Christian brothers. Charges to be arbitrated. Charge made by Walter T. Brown that Stephen A. Austin has made false accusations concerning Walt T. Brown. And number 2, charge made by Walter T. Brown that Stephen A. Austin has appropriated incorrectly and claimed as if it was his own concepts which were originally proposed by Walter T. Brown. The above 2 charges are to be arbitrated by Mr. Stephen E. Hurst, attorney at law in Encinita, California. Mr. Hurst will receive not more than $2,000 for his services and expenses in arbitrating the dispute. I agree to binding arbitration, and I promise to abide by Mr. Stephen E. Hurst's requests, rulings, and remedies. Stephen A. Austin. Okay. And this must be the letter again. Okay. That's what we saw. And that's what we see again. Okay. All right. So there it is. They're going to go to binding arbitration, and we're going to click this one. This one is Morris to Brown. I think that's what we do. Is that the latest one? Yeah, we'll go back one. Okay, this one was Austin to Brown. Let's go to here. Brown to Cuppage. Wait, that's 394, March of 94. Austin to Brown. Okay, well, let's just check out this one. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go back. Let's go back to Brown to Morris, or Morris to Brown. This is December 17th. Okay, December 17th, Dr. Okay, this is from, let's see, move that up. This is from Henry Morris. Okay. Institute for Creation Research, December 17th, 1993, again, 32 years ago. Dear Walt, I assume you have received Steve Austin's letter of November 24th indicating, sorry about that, indicating, wow, is this touchy? Indicating his willingness to submit the questions you have raised to Steve Hurst, an attorney here in San Diego area, who has an excellent record as an arbitrator as well as in general legal matters. Since he has not heard from you, he suggested that perhaps you are waiting to hear from me. I do know of his letter and approve of it and of this resolution of the controversy, even though I still think it would be far better for you to drop the entire matter. In any case, we look forward to hearing your decision. Yours in Christ, Henry M. Morris. Okay. And so let's close that one out. Go back. Okay, that was Brown to Morris. Morris to Brown, that was okay. And then this is going to be Brown to Morris on December 23rd of 1993. Okay, this is Thursday, December 23rd, 1993. Dr. Henry Morris and Steve Austin. Okay, this is to Henry Morris and Steve Austin, and this is from, it should be Walt Brown. Yeah, Walt Brown. Okay, here we go. So this is Walt's reply. Dear Steve and Henry, the good news is you are willing to submit our conflict to arbitration. The bad news is you are still avoiding fair Christian arbitration. Let me explain. Fair arbitration, it would obviously be unfair for me to pick the arbitrator. I could, with a few inquiries, choose an arbitrator I thought might be favorable to my point of view. Once you realized this, you would have a very uneasy feeling that possibly the decks were slightly stacked against you. It would insult your intelligence and sense of propriety by even suggesting that I pick the arbitrator. Why then do you think you should pick the arbitrator? I have already given you the choice of two fair ways to do this. You can submit the names of 3 possible arbitrators for my final selection, or I will submit 3 names to you. Both of you have ignored my suggestions. Here's a third simple, quick, and fair way to do it. Metropolitan Los Angeles is a large neutral area near both of us. Let's ask someone we know and respect in Greater Los Angeles to choose a local arbitrator. For example, David Coppage, Bolton Davis, David Heiser, Bob Coaf, John MacArthur, Dean Ortner, and George Vandeman. If you know others, add them to the list. Now you pick one, telephone or fax me his name, then I will immediately set up a conference call so we can make the first contact together and ask him to choose a local Christian arbitrator. If the neutral person declines for some reason, then I pick a name from the list, etc. Some of these men probably already know a good arbitrator. It would also be unfair for me to ask that the arbitration venue be Phoenix. That is why I wrote you on October 12th that I would search for Christian arbitrators in Los Angeles. You have asked that it be a suburb of San Diego, a small point, maybe, but having a neutral venue is easy and balanced. Your arbitration proposal does not say who pays the expenses involved. The fair way to handle it is for the party at fault to pay all expenses. Those expenses will include not only the arbitrator's fee, but also our respective travel, room and board expenses. My letter on October 12th explained this. Christian arbitration. Let's begin with the basis for the term and study Matthew 18, 15 to 17. And if your brother sins, go and reprove him in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two of you more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be as a Gentile and a tax gatherer. And if your brother sins, the Greek reads, now if sins the brother of thee, our controversy began by my telling you, Steve, that you have made serious and damaging false statements. You told others I had taken your material when I maintain you plagiarized. Furthermore, it is a pattern of plagiarizing. You acknowledged most of it in our phone conversation on June 30th, 1993, but then tried to justify it. In biblical terms, the issues are false witness and stealing. Concerning false statements, how would most people react if several witnesses, especially friendly acquaintances, accused them of saying something damaging that they did not believe they said? They would quickly talk to the witnesses so they could reconstruct the event or jog each other's recollection. You have not done that with Jane and Doug Brock, Steve. That should have been a red light for you, Henry, to cause you to look into this matter rather than just believing what you wanted to believe. Concerning plagiarism, Henry, I know you don't condone it, but I know, and you both know, that you, Henry, have put pressure on Steve to publish more. You have complained about his lack of publishing to others outside ICR. For you, Henry, writing comes easily, but for most people, it does not. Consider how your pressure to publish might push someone to plagiarize. This may also explain the other example of past plagiarism within ICR that I showed you. But if he does not listen to you, Steve, you denied my charges, so I documented all of it in a 13-page report giving, among other things, witnesses, dates, and places. If we go to arbitration, I will probably go to the effort of presenting other witnesses. You again denied any wrongdoing. Henry, contrary to Matthew 18:17, you encourage me not to make this dirty linen public. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. By last August 19th, it was obvious that the time for talking privately had passed. We were getting nowhere. From my point of view, you both were stonewalling. I was, and still am, prepared to let the church rule on the matter. What if you refuse to submit the issue to the church or refuse to listen to the church? If he refuses to listen even to the church, let him to be to you as a Gentile and tax gatherer. Okay. Yeah, we're doing okay. All right. But who is the church? To resolve this, we must agree on an unbiased Christian person or group who will study the problem I have raised and rule on it. This is where we have bogged down for the last 2 months. Since we don't have one distinct church body over us, I suggested that a Christian arbitrator act as the church. You both then seized on the word arbitrator and claimed with some justification that arbitration implies that both parties agree to the issue to be arbitrated. Therefore, you want the charges considerably narrowed, so Steve Austin does not have to face the broad range of plagiarisms we all know he has committed. Nice try, but my charges are not going to be narrowed. Notice in Matthew 18:17, the accuser, not the accused, reports the allegation to the church. So please don't try to state the charges or narrow them to only what you have done to me. Naturally, Steve does not want to face a charge that has taken and copyrighted for ICR the work of other researchers. He has already admitted guilt to me on the phone. It's an open and shut case, and you both know it. If you disagree, you, not I, should be the ones pushing for a ruling. Can you see how Christian arbitration differs from secular arbitration as you are proposing? How does that go again? If you disagree, you, not I, should be the ones pushing for a ruling. If you disagreed. Can you see how Christian arbitration differs from secular arbitration, as you are proposing? The question can be rephrased. Are you willing to have a neutral Christian judge rule over the alleged false statements and plagiarism by Steve Austin? I am. Despite your words, I have seen no clear action since June of 1993 that you want to resolve this. Consequences. Until now, I was willing to assume that maybe I had not been clear. You had not read my letters carefully, or you did not think I was serious. It is now obvious that you both are scrambling, trying to delay or maneuver this whole matter into a draw or difference of opinions. Maybe you want to wear me down or claim we were willing to arbitrate, but Walt refused. That won't work. Most who read our correspondence will judge correctly. As I wrote earlier, I sent out an initial mailing of the file of our correspondence, only to a very small number of people who have some reason for wanting or needing more information on this controversy. Here is a reaction from a leader of a creation society in a major city, a recently retired science professor. Quote, "We were saddened to learn of the ongoing conflict with ICR. We pray that they will soon come to see the harm they are causing to the common purpose and will adopt a more conciliatory and indeed a more biblical attitude. For what it is worth, our group is strongly supportive of your position." Unquote. A year or two ago, this group hosted a Back to Genesis seminar. I'm glad to say they were happy with it. I sincerely want ICR to be successful, but your unwillingness to admit and correct a pattern of serious mistakes is starting to harm ICR. I have had quite a few supportive phone calls and letters from neutral people who received the file. Here's another way the information spreads. At a monthly creation meeting in another major city, the visiting speaker had learned from you, Steve, about our conflict. He talked about it briefly to the audience. However, he did not have the whole story. A person in the audience to whom I had sent a copy of the file went up to the speaker afterward and explained the 5,700 feet issue as the basis for suggesting plagiarism. The speaker probably did not follow all the details, but realized that he did not have all the facts. This information is seeping out in many ways. I have since offered that speaker a copy of all the correspondence whenever he wants it. You can be certain that if you put out an incomplete story on the subject and I learn of it, I will offer the complete story. I am sorry that audience did not learn the whole story. Someday I may be forced to respond to your incomplete stories and use other media. These events and reactions will multiply every few months if you continue to drag your feet. Why don't you send out a complete copy of our correspondence to whomever you wish? Get some honest reactions from neutral people who will speak frankly to you. When the subject comes up, I will always try to encourage the people to send for the file so they can read your words, responses, lack of response, and self-contradictions. I gave you an easy out, Steve, a simple, relatively private way to admit your mistakes and take corrective measures. It could have all been handled in a one-page letter to me and the publishing of a paragraph or two. The matter would end there. As I wrote you, I would not publish or broadcast Austin's letter or use it in a legal suit. I would decline any request for information on this from the evolutionary community. One advisor told me my offer was an olive branch if she had ever seen one. Others, after reading everything in the file, said that your ignoring the olive branch was a serious mistake. Now that it is obvious you are both dragging your feet, my olive branch will be withdrawn on January 15th, 1994. I need to put this behind me in order to deal with other projects and issues. Later, Henry, if you decide you want to resolve this matter, you have an invitation to visit my office for a face-to-face meeting. Until you reach that point, or Steve agrees in writing to binding fair Christian arbitration according to Christ's instruction in Matthew 18:17, there is no point in us corresponding. Instead, I will increasingly let the file be seen by interested parties, perhaps for the next 20 years. Sincerely, Walter T. Brown, Jr. P.S. I don't want to sound preachy, but it may help if I explain a deeply held perspective I have on Matthew 18:15, 17. The body of Christ has many diverse interconnecting components. So does the human body and the body of every living animal. When one component of a body misbehaves, the other components are designed to correct the error. This is an amazingly complex and important design feature that shows the hand and intention of the creator. If errors cannot be corrected, then the body is diseased. A well-functioning body needs these thousands of feedback systems. What if the muscles in your arm refuse to respond to signals from your nerves telling your hand it is going in the wrong direction? You would be spastic. Likewise, the body of Christ needs an act to correct signals from its components. What if your nerves refuse to send signals to your muscles? You would have leprosy. Some Christians are uncomfortable sending quiet, private, but clear corrective signals to brothers and sisters. They know it might become awkward or unpleasant, as our exchange unfortunately has, but that abdication of responsibility harms the body, gives it Christian leprosy. You, I, and many others are the components that have quiet functions to perform. Matthew 18 tells us how the feedback process must work if the body is to function properly. Do the nerves try to destroy the arm each time it gives a correction? Of course not. I have written you that I intend no harm to Steve or ICR, but if one component refuses sound correction that was directed by the head, then amputation may be the best solution. That is what Matthew 18:17b is all about. Steve, that is why you are at step 4. You ignored my letter of August 19th with your knowledge, Henry, and perhaps at your direction. Moreover, you both are still refusing fair Christian arbitration, especially by maintaining that you will state the charges. None of all this opposes Christ's equally clear instructions concerning love and forgiveness. The body of Christ has many diverse, interacting, and mutually important components. Each component should appreciate the others. I sincerely appreciate most of the work you both have done for the creation movement. Nevertheless, the serious problem I am raising will harm the creation movement. Please acknowledge and correct your mistake. Okay, and this is the letter. Oh, they must have copy and pasted that. Okay, we don't have to read this, but this is where they got it. Consequences. Okay, this is the letter that was being quoted. Okay, and there's the PS. All right, so there we have it. Okay, let's jump back over here. Let's see what's happening. Okay. Looks good, and we can keep on rolling. That's about 20. Let's hear the response, shall we? What's going on here? This is from Morris, from Brown to Morris and Austin. Okay. Let's see, that was 12:23. When was this one? Let's do this again. Okay. Oh no, let's go back. I think this series goes Okay, let's Morris to Brown, 12:17. Did we do that one? I think we did. Brown to Morris, 12:23. That's the one we just did. This should be the 20th. Whoa. All right, let's go back up. Okay, Brown to Morris. I think that's the one we just did. Let me see if you guys are seeing this. Yeah, you should be able to see that. 12:23, Henry Morris, Steve Austin. Yep, we just did that one. December 23rd, we did that one. Okay, now let's go on to December 30th, Morris to Brown. Okay, this is going to be from Henry Morris, President. Okay, and this is on Institute of Creation Research letterhead. It's dated December 30th, 1993, so 32 years ago. And it's to Dr. Walt T. Brown, Phoenix, Arizona. Dear Walt, I have received your letter of December 23rd and find it very difficult to understand why you keep rejecting all of our proposals. It seems that we have no choice except to do what you say or else. Incidentally, the last arbitrator I suggested, Steve Hurst, was a person not known by either Steve or me, but one who was recommended to us by an attorney experienced in Christian arbitration. However, because you think he might be biased in our favor, we will drop the suggestion, as well as our suggestion of Emmett Williams. You have suggested 6 names of men in the LA area who could appoint a competent, unbiased Christian arbitrator. The first name on your list is David Coppage. Steve and I believe that David is an excellent choice. He has a creation ministry not affiliated with either ICR or Center for Scientific Creation. Also, David is familiar with Grand Canyon. Perhaps David could find a few hours out of his busy schedule to research and appoint a Christian arbitrator. I assume that you will contact him and make this request. Otherwise, you would probably think we would try to bias him in our favor. You have either ignored or rejected all of our responses, questions, and suggestions. It has become more difficult than ever for us to understand why you are doing this. The question of priority on a very controversial theory is, so far as I can see, a trivial matter, and Steve has already refuted your unwarranted charge of plagiarism. You keep citing Matthew 18 as a pattern for resolving the dispute, but this seems to me quite irrelevant. If anything, the discussion in 1 Corinthians 6 is more relevant. But in either case, I think it is an unworthy matter for Christian brothers to argue about at all. Apparently, you see it differently. However, so it looks like there is no way to settle this except by following your demands. Page 2, December 30th. Is that what this was? Yeah, page 2 of this goes on. In reference to Matthew 18:15, the Authorized Version and many others properly include the words against thee after if a brother trespass. Therefore, if you are abiding by the procedure of Matthew 18:15-17, you should include only the specific charges that you have against Steve Austin and nothing else. The assumption that against thee is in the original is strengthened by Peter's question, Matthew 18:21, and by Jesus' short statement in Luke 17:3 and 4. It appears to me, however, that you have abrogated the procedure of Matthew 18:15-17, and instead are asking for a type of settlement suggested in 1 Corinthians 6:5-8. You are asking to appoint a wise man among you who shall be able to judge between his brethren. This is acceptable to both Steve Austin and me, but again, notice the context. In 1 Corinthians 6:1 says, dare any of you having a matter against another go to law before the unjust. And in 1 Corinthians 6:7 says, why do you not rather allow yourselves to be defrauded? Clearly, this passage is talking about supposed sin of one Christian brother against another Christian brother. The general description of the charges you have against Steve Austin are contained in your correspondence. You are charging Steve Austin with making damning false statements to other people against you, and you are charging that he plagiarized your work. These are general charges, but you also need to bring the specific charges with details of time, places, and persons before a Christian arbitrator, and we would, of course, expect to see these explicitly listed in a short document, not a multi-page discussion, before submitting them to the arbitrator. If you are thinking that there are also other persons who may have been offended by Steve Austin's actions, these are not germane to this matter between you and Steve, so should not be included. If any such persons wish to bring their own complaints, they are free to do so apart from this particular contract. If you still choose to press this matter, let's get it settled before a Christian arbitrator as soon as possible. Enclosed is a revised contract for binding Christian arbitration, which has been signed by Steve Austin. Please sign and return one copy of the agreement to me and one copy, if David agrees, to David Coppage. There is no need to bicker any further about details. I trust you will either sign the contract or else please stop pressing the matter. We have many other things to do, and I am sure you do too. Sincerely, yours in Christ, Henry Morris, President. And here's the agreement for binding arbitration. Steve Austin, Institute of Creation Research, Santee, California, and Walter Brown, Jr. for Center for Science Creation, Phoenix, Arizona, agree to enter into binding arbitration in order to settle a dispute between Christian brothers. Charges to be arbitrated. Charge made by Walt Brown that Steve Austin has made false accusations concerning Walt Brown. And number 2, charge that made by Walt Brown that Steve Austin has appropriated incorrectly and claimed as if his own concepts, which were originally proposed by Walter T. Brown. The above charges are to be arbitrated by a professional Christian arbitrator to be selected by David Coppage in Newhall, California. The Christian arbitrator selected by David Coppage will receive not more than $2,000 for his services and expenses in arbitrating the dispute. David Coppage will receive $50 for his services. Payments of services and expenses for arbitration will be assigned to either Steve A. Austin or Walter T. Brown by the arbitrator. Signature of this contract causes any earlier agreement for binding arbitration between Walt Brown and Steve Austin to become void. I agree to binding arbitration, and I promise to abide by the arbitrator's requests, ruling, and remedies. Signed by Stephen Austin, December 30th. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Brown to Morris. Oh, we read that one already. And I think we read this one too. December 17th. Okay, let's get out of this. Okay, now this is going to be Brown to Morris, I believe. Morris to Brown. Did we just do that one? I think so. Yeah, we did this one. Okay. So we're going to go Brown to Morris. This is going to be January 14th. Friday, January 14th. This is the letter. Here's the letter. Let's look at the letter itself. That's a lot better than copy and pasting. Okay. Here's the actual letter. Center for Scientific Creation. Walter Brown, Jr., PhD, Director. This is Dr. Henry Morris, El Cajon, California. Dear Henry, I am surprised at your misreading of Scripture. You wrote, oh boy, sorry about that. Let's see if we can get it to go slowly. I'm surprised at your misreading of Scripture. You wrote that Matthew 18 is quite irrelevant, but 1 Corinthians is more relevant. In 1 Corinthians 6, 1-11, discourages lawsuits among Christians. I have neither brought nor threatened a lawsuit. Yes, lawsuit seeks remedy for crimes against the plaintiff only. But my proposal that we find one wise man who will be able to decide between his brothers, 1 Corinthians 6:5, does not mean that I must address only Austin's actions against me, or that I have abrogated the procedure of Matthew 18, 15-17, as you claim. I proposed selecting one wise man on October 19th, 1993, so we could resolve our disagreement quickly, quietly, and honestly. Nor is Matthew 18, 15-17 quite irrelevant. It contains Christ's clear, simple, and authoritative instruction for resolving serious allegations among Christians. Yes, some translations of 18:15 read, if a brother transgress against thee, but the words against thee are not found in the best Greek manuscripts. I gave you the Greek reading in my latest letter. In 1967, Zondervan published the New Testament from 26 translations with Curtis Vaughan as general editor. In discussing Matthew 18:15, they wrote on page 75, the words against thee are now recognized as not adequately supported by original manuscripts. Other texts make this clear. Paul in 1 Corinthians 5, 9-13 gives instructions similar to those of Christ in Matthew 18, 15-17. Covetousness is strongly desiring something that rightfully belongs to someone else. It precedes stealing in general and plagiarism in particular. Paul tells the church to judge covetousness and other sins committed by Christians. Notice these sins are not restricted to those that have harmed the accuser. In other words, wrongdoing by a Christian does not have to harm a particular person for the church to deal with it. The Bible is full of instances where one believer admonished another for the sins against others. Therefore, you have no basis for insisting on what my charges are. The broad pattern of Austin's plagiarism is highly relevant in seeing his plagiarism involving me. This pattern and the other example from ICR harms the creation movement. This has serious direct consequences for me and many others. That is reason enough to bring the broader problem to the church. You proposed agreement for binding arbitration has other flaws. I explained most of them before, so will not repeat them here. One not specifically mentioned is that your signature, Henry, agreeing to binding arbitration must also be on the agreement. The arbitrator might make several possible rulings that you, not Austin, will have to carry out. For example, something may need to be published in Acts and Facts. I understand my previous letters, which have addressed all the issues you have raised. But if you and Austin ever decide to allow a Christian arbitrator to rule on all alleged plagiarisms in a biblical prescribed manner, I will contact David Coppage by letter and send you a courtesy copy. Until then, we have nothing more to discuss on this matter. Sincerely, Walt Brown. Okay. And what's the response to that? Morris to Brown. Morris to Brown. This is January 20th, 1994. So 31 years ago, this was being discussed. This is on the Institute of Creation Research. This is going to be signed by Henry Morris, and this is to Dr. Walt Brown. Dear Walt, I am disappointed and saddened by your latest letter of January 14th. It seems we have reached an impasse. Let me make one last plea to get you to drop the whole matter before it does even greater harm to the great cause of scientific biblical creationism to which we have, sorry about this. This is not working very well. Ah, close. Do we have it? No. All right. There we go. That'll have to work. Okay. Let me make one last plea to you to drop this whole matter before it does even greater harm to the greater cause of scientific biblical creationism, to which we have both dedicated our lives. No one at ICR, to my knowledge, has ever been guilty of either maligning you or plagiarizing your work. When you insist that we apologize for one or both of these, you are asking that we acknowledge something that is not true. And this we cannot do in honesty. Even if an arbitrator should decide in your favor, we still could not do this because it would not be the truth. I am sorry if anything we have said or done has been misunderstood by you, but that is all it could possibly be. I wish you would be willing to accept this. With respect of the question of maligning you, the fact is that we never even mention you or your theories in our public messages. When people ask us about you in private or occasionally from the floor, we respond in words to the effect that you are a fine scientist, that you are doing a great job in promoting recent special creation, and that your seminars are excellent. If they ask specifically about your flood model, we reply that there are many other competing flood models, and we are more concerned with the fact of the flood than with the speculations regarding the physical mechanisms which might have produced it. I know that is how I respond to such questions, and I am confident that others at ICR respond in similar fashion. I again asked them that specific question yesterday at our staff meeting, and all of our scientists again assured me that this is all they do. I believe I should take their word for this as honest and dedicated Christian men, unless you can provide us more than vague generalizations and secondhand stories to the contrary. You are the only person so far as I know who has ever made such charges. If others have said this, it has not come to me. Page 2, January 20th, 1994. With respect to the question of the so-called breach dam model of Grand Canyon, Steve has shown, supported by both Ed Holroyd and Russ Humphreys, that he had discussed this in one of his earlier Grand Canyon guidebooks before you had ever published anything on it. Steve certainly did not get the idea from you. However, he has been willing to concede that you also may have arrived at it independently, just as others have before both of you. At most, it is a trivial issue, especially since the whole concept is an unproven hypothesis. In any case, no plagiarism was involved. Excuse me. You also speak vaguely of other ICR plagiarizations, but with no citation of what, when, or where. You once noted a so-called plagiarism in the Age of the Cosmos by Harold Schlusser, but that is the only instance that also was trivial. As I wrote previously, the case cited was one of a standard derivation. Almost certainly the author you felt compelled to defend got it from somewhere else himself. All textbooks do this sort of thing as far as standard derivations are concerned. Surely you know this. In any case, I do not know what Schluster would say in his own defense, as we have not heard from him in about 8 years. Merely to placate you, however, I agreed that we would not reprint or promote the book anymore, and that we would remove it from our catalog when we publish a new one. Schlusser's monogram does have much good material in it, so it would be sinful to burn the remaining stock just because of this trivial duplication of a standard derivation. I hope you can see that from our point of view, your charges are both baseless and harmful, not only to ICR, but also to the cause of Christ. To us, your motives in pressing this matter are at least perplexing, and I would urge you once again to prayerfully consider forgetting the whole matter. You have rejected our last and final offer of arbitration. If you now insist on publicizing your charges, which we consider false and slanderous, even more widely than you already have, you will force us to respond in kind. This response will have to be sent to anyone. This response will have to be sent to anyone inquiring about your charges. All of this can only injure your own ministry as well as more importantly, the cause of Christ in general. Therefore, once again, please drop this issue before it goes any further, and so will we. It would be much better for us to work in harmony together for the great truth of creation. Okay, let's see what happens here. Okay, Brown to Morris, Morris to Brown, Brown to Morris. Oh, we did this one. November 10th, 1993. Okay. This was November 10th. Yeah, this might be interesting. Okay, this is a few months before that, or the month before that. And this is a little bit out of order, but I think it's probably worth reading. This is from Walt Brown to Henry Morris, dated November 10th, 1993. Dear Henry, you should not be surprised that I've recently started informing others of our problem that has gone unresolved since June. On September 21st, I wrote that since Austin ignored my offer of Christian arbitration, I no longer feel responsibility to keep close hold on this information. I welcome scrutiny of this matter by anyone. Matthew 18 calls for the privacy for only steps 1 and 2. Austin is at step 4. Nor should you characterize this as you did. We hear, ? That you have been accusing both Steve and ICR in general of plagiarism and the hurtful action of various individuals and possibly in your public meetings. First, I have no public meetings since June. Second, I wrote you on October 12th. I sent out an initial mailing of the file of our correspondence only to a small number of people who have some reason for wanting or needing more information. Of course, that number will continue to grow until this matter is honestly, fairly, and forthrightly resolved. The more it grows, the less control I have over who else will see the file. The file speaks for itself and allows people to see clearly who is in the wrong. You stated in your November 3rd letter, since you have rejected the arbitrator, I suggested we would naturally reserve the right to approve the one you suggest. I wrote that I would give you a choice of 3 nearby Christian arbitrators who are independent of our organizations and unknown to us. Allowing either side to reject any proposed arbitrator could produce allowing either side to reject any proposed arbitrator could produce a stalemate. If you wish, you may submit the names of 3 such arbitrators to me. The first step is for you and Steve to agree in writing to binding arbitration as I have done for you. The stipulation that the arbitrator be reasonably familiar with geology is clearly unnecessary to decide whether Steve Austin has made false accusations and 2 has plagiarized. Adding needless requirements is another way to derail the arbitration process, which I hope you are not trying to do. If the arbitrator found to be needed some background in geology, he would simply seek the opinion of a geologist or withdraws himself from the process. I also reject your 5 statements of what my charges are against Austin are. I also reject your 5 statements of what my charges against Austin are. My last letter and the 13-page report are quite specific about the 2 charges italicized above. And I believe the arbitrator will agree. If not, he will tell me and I will comply. Nor is your agreement on the specific charges called for in Matthew 18. I will state charges, not you. Any stipulations you wish to inject can be a matter for the arbitrator to decide after Austin and you submit to binding arbitration. Until you both sincerely seek to resolve this, any future correspondence between us is pointless. As now details come to my attention, I will amend. As new details come to my attention, I will amend, as I promised, the July 6th report. Enclosed is the very latest, slightly modified version along with an amended version of my September 20th letter, Austin Brown Exchange. I leave this morning for Russia and will return in November 24th. Sincerely, Walt. Okay. What's this? Austin to Brown. Morris to Brown. That was November 3rd. So these are going in backwards order. Sorry about that. We are going back in time. Okay. Okay, so this was before that. This was November 3rd. This is what he was responding to. November 3rd, 1993. Dear Walt, pressure of various out-of-town trips and other urgent matters have prevented either Steve Austin or me from replying to your letter of October 12th before now. In the meantime, we hear that you have been accusing both Steve and ICR in general of plagiarism and other hurtful actions to various individuals and possibly in your public meetings. Your letter of October 12th says that you are mailing information concerning this controversy to people not affected by this matter. I hope this is not the case. To respond to your demand that your charges be submitted to an arbitrator, we are willing to do this, although we think this is overkill on a very trivial matter. Since you have rejected the arbitrator I suggested, we would naturally reserve the right to approve the one you suggest. It should be someone who is a Christian and reasonably familiar with geology, yet not connected with either of our organizations. With respect to the matter be arbitrated, it is necessary, of course, to have these in the form of specifics rather than generalities, that is, names, dates, places, specific content. These matters should be charges made by you against Dr. Austin. These charges should not include secondary matters that do not relate to you, i.e., any grievance Dr. Edward Hoyle may have against Dr. Austin. In your letters of October 12th, you wrote, each letter from you and Austin has denied slightly different charges than I have ever made. That shows me that we need to get an agreement on specific charges that you have against Dr. Austin. Here are the main charges made concerning you and Dr. Austin as I have understood. These are abstracted and possibly rephrased from your manuscript of July 6th, your letter of September 20th, and the letter of October 12th. Charge number 1, Dr. Steve Austin made incorrect statements concerning Walt Brown Jr. to Dr. and Mrs. Doug Brock at Rockford, Illinois. The incorrect speech by Dr. Austin presumably occurred at the People's Church in Belmont, Wisconsin on November 3rd, 1990. The content of the speech is not well described, but included a statement by Austin that Brown had taken some of Austin's material on the Grand Canyon. Charge number 2. Dr. Austin made incorrect statements concerning Dr. Brown to Dr. Russell Humphreys of Albuquerque, New Mexico. This speech by Austin to Humphreys caused Humphreys to make a specific charges to Brown and Mr. Robert Gentry of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, including the charge that Brown may have plagiarized Austin's work in the breach dam theory of erosion of Grand Canyon. Charge number 3. Okay. Again, please indicate when and where and what. Charge number 3, between September 16th, 1988, when Brown made his first public lecture on his theory for erosion of Grand Canyon, and January 23rd, 1989, when Austin wrote Dr. Ed Holroyd for permission to publish a lake map, Austin incorrectly appropriated and claimed as if his own concepts a theory which Walt Brown had advocated in public lectures. Specifically, Austin appropriated from Brown's public lecture the notion that a large lake had existed in southeastern Utah and that the elevation of the lake was 5,700 feet. Okay. Charge number 4, Dr. Austin emphasized a false year of copyright, 1988, for an ICR Grand Canyon guidebook in conversation and correspondence with Dr. Brown. The purpose of the emphasis was for Austin to establish priority of his theory over Brown's manuscript. Okay. Charge number 5. Dr. Austin needs to acknowledge publicly that Brown is the source of the named Grand Lake in connection with theories of erosion of Grand Canyon. Please either confirm or supplement these specific charges so that both we and the proposed arbitrator will know exactly what they are. Remember, these charges should be specific between you and Dr. Austin. If Dr. Ed Holroyd has a grievance, let him, not you, bring it to an arbitrator. As you know, Steve is prepared to deny them and to document his details. I still think you would be wise to drop this whole matter. We both have a far more important message to convey to the public than a brotherly argument over priority of an unproven theory. Okay. And that was November 3rd. So what's this link down here? Brown to Morris. October 12th. Okay, so we're going back in time. Okay, October 12th. Let's see if there's anything before that. Brown. That was October 12th. Morris to Brown. Rather, October 5th. Oh, we're going back in time. Let's read these in chronicle order starting now. Did we do this one? Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah, we did this one. Make sure we did this. And Brown's attempt to cover his plagiarism. Yeah, we did this one. This is how we started it. This is at the beginning of the talk. What's this one? Brown 10.5. Morris to Brown. October 5th. Okay, let's see if there's any more. Brown to Morris. That's on September 21st. What's this one? Since October 12th. So September 21st. Okay, we'll do this one. We'll try and go in order now. Okay. This is ICR writing to Brown, and this is from Henry Morris. So I apologize, these aren't in chronological order. They got a little bit, what's going on here? There we go. October 5th, 1993, so 32 years ago, no, 32 years ago. Dear Walt, and this is, October 5th, 1993. Dear Walt, I'm sorry to be slow to respond to your letter of September 21st, but I have made trips to Virginia, Tennessee, Florida since then, and there are simply not enough hours in the day to handle everything that comes up. As I've explained before, there seems to me to be no basis in either fact or reason for Christians to argue over priorities in a questionable theory that is not susceptible of proof or disproof, either biblically or scientifically. It would be to your best interest as well as ours simply to drop the issue and let us both get on to our more important activities. If you insist, however, on carrying out some kind of arbitration, I would suggest asking Emmett Williams to serve as umpire. He is familiar with the various theories of Grand Canyon formation, yet is not concerned with either of our organizations, so presumably could make a knowledgeable but unbiased judgment about it. We would each have to bear half the expenses involved. If this does not suit you, I think any further discussion is pointless. Steve has categorically denied your charge that he has either plagiarized your work or accused you of plagiarizing his, and I believe him. All of us also categorically deny that we have ever spoken against you in public. Page 2. The only time any of us mention you, to the best of my knowledge, is to respond to audience questions about your flood model. Then we have to say, in all honesty, that it is one of many such models, and we are not committed to any of them. We are more concerned with the fact of the global flood than with its mechanisms. None of us, however, has ever criticized you personally, so far as I can find. For that matter, we do not necessarily reject your flood model. We remain neutral on the subject, just as with many other flood models that have been proposed. On the other hand, we appreciate your strong defense of recent creation, the global flood, and the biblical Christianity in general. We praise the Lord for the many people you are reaching with these vital truths. Okay, so that was September 21st, I believe. Brown to Morris. Okay. What's this one? Brown to Morris. No, that's not Brown to Morris. That's more. Oh, that's October 5th. Okay. Page is not working. Why not? Okay, now let's try this one. This is October 10th. And this is Brown to Morris on October 12th. Dear Henry, thank you for your letter dated October 5th and your kind words. There are a few points in your letter that are not clear. Are you accepting my offer of arbitration? Are you accepting it only under the condition that Emmett Williams is the arbitrator? If so, stipulating who the judge and jury must be is a highly irregular in any sincere desire to reach an agreement. Has seen Austin accepted my offer? For now, I will assume that you, a skilled and prolific writer, were writing in good faith and that any ambiguity was not intentional, and you truly want to resolve the matter. I do. Contention among Christians is wrong. Besides, it's harmful to the creation movement. To proceed with Christian arbitration, 3 specific questions must be carefully answered. 1, what charges and specifications will the arbitrator address? 2, what will the arbitrator do? And 3, who should the arbitrator be? We must agree on 2 and 3. Since I am making the charges, I must state them and give enough specifics for an arbitrator to rule in their validity. The charges and specifications, the charges have always been that Steve Austin has made false accusations and has plagiarized copyright infringement. More specifically, he told others that I took material of his on the Grand Canyon, when in fact he took the copyrighted material of Ed Holroyd, and other researchers. Again, I must emphasize that for several years I chose to overlook all of this to avoid a divisive priority fight. It was only when Bob Gentry relayed similar false accusations to me that I had to set the record straight. As painful and time-consuming as that would be, Bob's project, which involved me, my credibility, and considerable time and money on his part, would be tarnished if the accusations were correct. Each letter from you and Austin have denied slightly different charges than I have ever made. For example, in your last letter, you said, all of us categorically deny that we have ever spoken against you in public. You both may have tried consciously or unconsciously to recast the issue into one that makes you feel better or is easier to defend. For now, I will assume that your words were simply imprecise, or you did not read carefully what I was saying. Obviously, the accused never dictates the charges and specifications. It is also important that we not get sidetracked on irrelevant issues. The validity of the Grand Canyon explanation of the hydroplate theory is not at issue, as you keep saying. I am not concerned with your opinions on either. Assume, if you wish, that both are wrong. What will the arbitrator do? I propose that the arbitrator decide which charges and specifications, if any, are correct. Then he should decide what corrective action should be taken. Finally, the arbitrator would send a short statement of his findings to you, Austin, and me. Of course, the three of us must agree in writing to binding arbitration. You propose that we would each have to bear half the expenses involved. I disagree. If I concocted this whole issue and Austin did nothing wrong, as he apparently is telling you, why should he bear any expenses? I should bear them all. On the other hand, if it is ruled that Austin has both falsely accused and plagiarized, then why should I pay for his wrongful actions? If he is guilty of only one charge, then splitting the cost might be a fair compromise. Notice that if Austin is guilty of only one specification under a charge, then he is guilty of that charge. For example, if he only took and copyrighted material without permission from another researcher, but not Holroyd or me, then he has plagiarized. Finally, neither ICR nor CSC should bear any expenses. Austin and or I should bear the expenses, not our respective ministries. Having ICR or CSC pay would be highly improper. Although I have not gone through this procedure before, I suspect that the total cost will be less than $2,000. Once we agree on the matters raised in this letter and we all sign statements of binding arbitration, I visualize both Steve Austin and I mailing to each other and the arbitrator all relevant material. I never received from Austin some of his latest relevant writings. He said on June 30th he would send me. A week or so later, Austin and I should meet with the arbitrator so that all the questions can be asked and answered. This would give Austin an opportunity to question me face to face. Then the arbitrator will want to look into some matters in more detail, primarily by phone and letter. Finally, we would issue a draft report and asset costs to which Austin and I might have a time to respond before the final report is issued. The arbitrator's job is not complex from a scientific or administrative standpoint. Who should the arbitrator be? You suggested Emmett Williams, with whom you and Austin have worked much more closely than I. For several reasons, I believe this would be inappropriate. Impartiality is the primary requirement of an arbitrator. Emmett is a fine man who has and will continue to be an active creationist. He undoubtedly has opinions of all of us, which, despite his best efforts, might influence his judgments. Ruling against Austin or myself would probably place him in an awkward position in the future. Therefore, he might be inclined to mediate rather than arbitrate. Besides, Emmett is not well grounded in the law. Another problem with having Emmett is geography. It would be difficult and expensive for three of us to have a face-to-face meeting in Atlanta. Instead, the arbitrator should live somewhere near Phoenix and San Diego to minimize travel costs. If you agree, I will start looking in the yellow pages of Los Angeles for 3 creation arbitrators. You and Austin can make the final selection. In this way, we will agree to arbitrate in good faith without any hope of selecting a favorable arbitrator. Once both of you sign a copy and return the enclosed form, I will begin the selection process. We are both very busy and regret spending time trying to resolve this matter. The best way to prevent any further waste of time is for Austin to admit forthrightly his mistake. The sooner it happens, the less painful it will be. If Austin had accepted my offer of August 19th, then rather than now, we could have saved ourselves much trouble, and the matter would probably be resolved. Let's get on with it. Frequently, I've asked Austin simply to admit his mistake and take corrective action. This is a very easy and straightforward. What might this entail? Steve would send me a brief letter similar to the following. Dear Walt, I want to acknowledge some mistakes I have made and assure that they will not be repeated. First, during the last few years, I have privately expressed to a few people, including Doug and Jane Beck, that I thought you had taken material of mine on the Grand Canyon. I know that was not true, as I am able to recall people who have heard this from me. I informed them of my new understanding. I will not speak against you again without first discussing any disagreements with you privately. As you were aware, before you began your studies of Grand Canyon, I frequently wondered if the former Hopi Lake in eastern Arizona could somehow breach the Kaibab Plateau. Two other geologists during the last 140 years have made similar proposals. Ed Holroyd strengthened that thought when he showed me in 1986 where a large lake could have been entrapped behind the Kaibab Plateau. He wondered whether a fault might have occurred near what is now the visitor center, which emptied the lake suddenly, eroding the Grand Canyon. In 1988, I learned that you were proposing with some specificity based on field discoveries you made that such an event happened with several lakes, one of which you were calling Grand Lake. That gave me confidence in my earlier idea, so I tried to publish something as quickly as possible. I modified the ICR's 1989 Grand Canyon guidebook to include Holroyd's map and added a statement that this lake breached its dam to form the Grand Canyon. As I now recall, my request reference to the lake's elevation being at 5,700 feet did come from you, as did the name Grand Lake. I continue to favor the view of the breach occurred through over. I continue to favor the view that the breach occurred through or over the Kaibab Plateau rather than your explanation involving the Echo Vermilion Cliff Complex. I should have been more specific in acknowledging that Ed Holroyd was the source of the figure I used, especially after I suggested how I could do so, and he published the idea himself. Now I realize that by not acknowledging my sources, most people assume that I originated the ideas or discoveries. It was also a serious error to copyright artwork from other researchers without their permission. It would not happen again. Your explanation for the Grand Canyon motivated me to quickly and more forcefully claim that the Grand Canyon formed by the breaching of a dam. In trying to establish my priority, I should not have emphasized the false 1988 copyright in my conversation and correspondence with you. Within the next year, I will add a paragraph or two in some publications of mine giving the proper credits after I draft it. I will send it to you for comments on its accuracy and completeness. In the future, I hope we can do a better job of exchanging information. Henry Morris concurs with all of this. Sincerely. And then Steve Austin could sign it, and that would eliminate the whole thing. That would be the end of it. Okay, going back to ending that sample letter, going on to what Walt wrote. Henry, please be assured that I'm not trying to embarrass anyone or harm ICR. If Austin was sincere, did what he promised, and his letter was complete, accurate, and forthright, the matter would end as far as I'm concerned. I would not publish or broadcast Austin's letter or use it in a legal suit. I would decline any request for information on this from the evolutionists community. I would only show the letter to those who raised the subject privately with me or who have already read the file since Austin declined my offer of Christian arbitration. Some, such as Russ Humphreys, might wonder why I concern myself with Austin's taking and copywriting for ICR ideas and artwork of other researchers. After all, that does me no harm. In a secular legal sense, he's right. For those acts of plagiarism, I have no grounds for redress, nor do I seek them. I raise these issues because of the statement, if your brother sins, go and reprove him. No one likes to do this. However, our Lord told us to do it. Take something that does not belong to you, even ideas and artwork. Taking something that does not belong to you, even ideas and artwork, is wrong. In fact, it is stealing. In Austin's case, it is a pattern that has also impinged on me. For that, admonishment and corrective action is needed. I ask for your help in this matter. Since Austin ignored my August 19 offer of arbitration, I sent out an initial mailing to a small number of people who have some reason for wanting or needing more information on the contrary. Of course, that number will continually grow until this matter is honestly, fairly, and forthrightly resolved. The more it grows, the less control I have over who else will see the file. The most frequent comment from people who have no reason to take sides is first shock that a conflict exists between us. Then they asked, why is it so hard for ICR to admit a mistake? Is it pride? One person thought this procedure was so appropriate and healthy, if only to lay down future guidelines for the creation scientific community to abide by. I agree. In the end, I believe much good will come from all of this. Sincerely, Walt Brown. Agreement for binding arbitration. I agree to binding arbitration and I promise to abide by the arbitrator's requests, rulings, and remedies. This is Walt Brown, Steve Austin, and Henry Morris. Okay, and this is the letter that I just read, I do believe. I think so. Okay. Yep, that's the letter we just read. And there's the arbitration process. Okay, so we're getting through round 3. And let's see, I think we did this one on October 5th. We'll see. Okay, this is dated October 5th from ICR. Yeah, we read this one already. Okay, let's see if we read the other one. Brown to Morris. Yeah, I believe we read this one too. Yep, I think we read them. Okay, so I think that's the end of what, round 2. Yeah, the plot thickens. Okay, so let's jump out of here. We'll remove that and just close here. So you might be wondering, why are we going through this stuff? It's 32 years old. Well, the hydroplate theory is still being kicked to the curb 32 years later, and it's made accurate predictions, including what's in a comet, what's in an asteroid, and yet creationists and evolutionists are not watching it, are not even are not talking about it. Oh, let's look at some comments here. It says, hello, what is the topic? Well, this is the topic of this mainly is it has to do with the Walt Brown controversy, and Walt Brown came up with a theory called the hydroplate theory, which logically explains 25 major features such as the mid-oceanic ridge, plateaus, why the near side of the moon is pounded and not the far side, and it explains so many things on Earth and in the solar system, and yet it's being kicked to the curb. And it makes astoundingly accurate predictions like what's in a comet and what's in an asteroid. And again, it's being validated by NASA scientists. So this is a powerful creation weapon to help people put their faith in the Bible. And yet it's being kicked to the curb by evolutionists and creationists alike. And this is one of the reasons of why I believe it's because there's a can of worms nobody wants to talk about alleged plagiarism in the past, 32 years ago. And it's going to be going, and we've done round 1 where Walt Brown tried to do this privately. It was rejected. And then we did round 2, and they're now setting up for arbitration. And so that's going to be round 3. We're going to read the arbitration, how that happened. And again, we're not trying to tar and feather anybody. We're not trying to throw mud on anybody or any organization. We just want the truth to get out there and for science to advance. And right now, science is in the dark ages as far as the flood models go. In dark ages is when it's when only one view. You got a sacred cow and you can't even question it. That's a problem. That's the dark ages. You have this idea and it's taught as dogma. And evolutionists and blind chancers do that with the Big Bang and evolution. And there's just one way to look at it. And as creationists, we should have a higher standard than that. If there's 2 theories, let's present both of them and let people think. Because if only one theory is presented, like the blind chancers do, people just memorize. And again, we should say, be an example for the blind chancers and the secularists. There's 2 theories. Here they are. You can compare and contrast them and come to your own conclusion. But it's sad that people are coerced into silence because they don't want to kick the sacred cow because it could impact them financially. And that's another domino that has to fall. People have to have the ability to think. And it's going to be, which creation organization is going to let this into their museums first? Whoever does that will have a huge feather in the hat, according, in the future generations. And I think that their donations will go up because creationists should want to educate, not indoctrinate. And when flood models, especially a secular flood model, it just sped up. Plate tectonics, you got the plates moving slowly. Catastrophic plate tectonics is just a secular model with the plates moving quickly. And there's another model, a biblical model called the hydroplate theory. And I suggest and I challenge the big main creation organizations, who's going to put it in your museum first? Who's going to allow people to think first? The hydroplates already made it. You're going for second place there. That's in Broken Bow, Nebraska at the Boneyard Creation Museum. They got the hydroplate theory presented there. What I'd like to see is both theories. This is plate tectonics. This is hydroplate. These are their predictions. If you don't make predictions, you're doing weak science. And these are the accurate predictions. And this is the biblical support. And let people look at them and then just go wherever the science leads. That's why we're doing this. 32 years, this thing's been kicked to the curb and nothing's happened. The hydroplate theory is still the redheaded stepchild that nobody wants to talk about. They still are saying terrible things about Walt Brown. And so we are just letting people get all the information where Walt tried to do it privately. They went to binding arbitration. He gave them evidence, and the mediator ruled in the favor of Walt Brown, and those agreements were broken. And so now it's time to bring it to the church. And you can look at all the information and come to an informed conclusion yourself. And then hopefully the science will advance. So I'm just encouraging the scientific creation leaders, creationists to start, when you go to creation museums, ask about the hydroplate. When you hear creation speakers, ask about them and ask them, why is a theory that's making accurate predictions not being discussed? That's pretty odd, I would say. So anyhow, those are some things that we can do. This has to be a grassroots movement. Clearly, the leaders on top aren't going to bring it into the mainstream. I think there's a couple that want to, but I think there's some resistance inside their organizations that's keeping it from happening. So it's going to have to be a grassroots organization, people asking questions about the hydroplate, and just let's discuss the strengths and weaknesses of each theories, and let's present their predictions. And if they don't make predictions, that's weak science. And so thank you for being here this whole time. And we're going to go on. Let's see, we're at round 2. Round 3 is going to be mediation. Oh, and I'll share you this. If you want to hear this being discussed, you can go into hydroplate. You're going to, let's see, we're sharing. We're going to go into YouTube. Let's go into the week of celebration. And all you have to do is type in blackballed. And you can listen to Pastor Lee. He was. Yeah, so you can listen to that. Why was Walt Brown blackballed? That is 6 minutes long. You'll get a quick overview, and it's pretty. It's not fun to show this. It's not enjoyable to show this, and I'd rather not show this. But this is where we are. This is where we are. This is apparently is what needs to happen so that science can advance and the truth can prevail. And we're doing it now so people can make the appropriate adjustments. We don't want this to be drug out. We want this to be, it's okay. There were some things that happened in the past. If a man makes a mistake and doesn't correct it, he makes another mistake. So, and if an organization makes a mistake and doesn't correct it, they make another mistake. And so it's just a time to say, you know what, there are some things that happened in the past and we're trying to rectify it. And we're going to let the hydroplate theory be discussed in our organization. We're going to even allow it to be presented in our creation museums. And again, the creation organization that does that first is going to have a huge feather in their hat because they're going to show that, hey, we want people to think. And they're going to set an example for the secular community of not just showing what they want people to memorize, not just presenting one perspective as dogma. As creationists, we should be better than that. And so again, pray for creation leaders, hopefully that they'll step up to the plate and they'll want people to think instead of just memorize a secular model sped up. So anyhow, we thank you for coming and stay tuned for round 3. It's going to be mediation. Have a blessed evening.